Hello and welcome to Contract from Below. As always, I'm your host Khan, and today I have two co-hosts, Ben
Hello.
and Tanner.
Hello.
Let's get into the episode here. So today's episode is going to be about politics. First, though, we're going to go over a couple of quick news kind of bits. So, Double Masters was announced, and the prices are kind of high. This set I feel like is going to have a lot of really key reprints, especially for Commander players like us. Mana Crypt, Doubling Season, Blightsteel Colossus, all of those are already really, really, really good. But it's like $16.30 a pack, and like they're pre-ordering for $25 on TCG Player right now, which is kind of insane. What do you two think of this?
I just think it's unreasonable. They're promoting the fact that there are going to be box toppers, but at the same time, you have to pay about $400 to actually get access to those.
Yeah, it is very expensive for what you could get. I mean, the odds of getting rares and mythics are doubled in this set, right? But how many valuable rares and mythics will there end up being? Like, who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like it's such a huge increase in price from those, even from those, $10 Masters packs that we've, come to be begrudgingly okay with. It's so expensive. It's like $45 a draft. It's too much, I think. I think that for most people, I would advise them just pick up singles because they'll decrease in price some amount due to the reprints. I wouldn't draft this.
I think for a draft experience, it's definitely too expensive.
Especially if you're cracking the set for value. I think it's very difficult to actually break even when cracking a booster pack because you can get really lucky and spend $16 to get a Mana Crypt, but most of the time you're going to be getting some sort of, chaff rare or potentially just some wacky mythic.
My guess is probably how Wizards would justify the price is by saying, sure, that may be true, but your odds of pulling mythics and rares are double just by including twice as many in packs.
But then, how many? I mean, it'll ultimately come down to how many 50-cent rares and mythics are in these. There's always stinkers in every single one of these. I've cracked Horizons packs, and the amount of crappy bulk rares in there it's so high.
Yeah, that's true. Right now we don't know what all of them are going to be, but yeah, there inevitably will be low value mythics and rares. I'm just saying I think that's probably Wizards' justification for charging more as well. Your odds are doubled.
But I feel like I would almost rather have the normal rate with a lower price. I don't think it's something to actually compliment them on if the price is also, as a result, going to be higher.
Yeah, I would agree. I prefer to have less expensive packs as well. And also, even if that is the case, isn't that still an acknowledgement of the secondary market by saying these rare or these particular pieces of cardboard are worth more for some reason?
That's not their reason, right? Their reason is, for increasing the prices. Not only are these going to be a lot of very in-demand cards, not expensive, but in demand, but also the production cost is higher. There's physically more cards per pack. So it will cost them more to print that many, although, it doesn't cost them that much to print one extra card, but, whatever.
So do these packs actually, I didn't realize they had more cards in them. I thought just like previous, I guess, common or uncommon slots would just be taken up by mythics or rare slots.
No, there's an additional card. There's an additional rare. I think I don't actually know if this is 100% confirmed anywhere, but I'm fairly certain that there's an additional card each pack.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, I think they're just adding an additional card rather than actually removing any other rarity slot.
Yeah, because I guess if they were to cut other slots for more mythics and rares, that'd probably be even worse of a justification for raising the price because you're still getting the same number of cardboard pieces.
Yeah, it's just so marginal that I don't know if it's worth it. Anyway, let's move on to our next topic here. Companions. Wizards have talked about, and many people online have suggested, potentially changing the way the mechanic works. Now, this ultimately, I don't know if it's going to have too much of an impact on Commander, because I don't think most Commander decks are going to be able to properly fit a companion. But it probably means that they will it'll reduce their power level and demand. So if you want to pick up a foil Lurrus, let's say, as your commander, because I think that's a really great commander in general, maybe waiting for them to make some more changes, ban it one more time, probably out of modern, that'll be a good chance to pick up some foil copies after all that settles.
Yeah, I definitely think we'll be seeing a lot less of the companions in the near future. I think there's likely going to be some change made, whether it be continuing bannings in other formats. I mean, we just saw the first ever vintage ban. Well, I guess not the first vintage ban. They banned Scheherazade, but
the first power level ban.
The first power level vintage ban, which of course is unprecedented. I mean, we'll likely see either more of those bans happening in other formats, or, as you mentioned, some sort of change to the mechanic, which I hope they actually do. I don't like seeing cards banned. It feels really bad when you buy a card just to see it unplayable in the format that you wanted to use it in. And I hope that they're able to somehow adjust the power level of the mechanic.
So, Colin, what were some suggestions floating around online people were talking about for updating the companion mechanic?
Yeah, so some suggestions that I've heard here and there would be like, if you have a card in your companion zone at the start of the game, you have to exile a card from your hand. This way, the card advantage aspect is kind of gone. It doesn't mean you get an extra free card. Another one would be you just mulligan one less, basically. So, you just bolt to 6 every time, and then London mulligan rules, you put some on the bottom, and then it goes from the zone to your hand, which I actually really like that a lot, because it makes it so that in formats, we're in like modern, where Thoughtseize is such a prevalent card, usually that card is basically dead against companions, because you can't Thoughtseize it out of their command zone, essentially. So, yeah, those are some suggestions I've seen here and there. I'm worried that they're going to just ban something like Mishra's Bauble instead of Lurrus, but I don't know. Who knows?
I actually really like that change as well, because of the commander's prevalency in a legacy. And I think because you are aware that your opponent has that companion, you can just Cabal Therapy on turn 1 with a promise of a hit. And I think that will make them much less powerful.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. That's a really interesting point, actually.
I mean, the card is already played throughout Legacy and all the Delver decks and whatnot. So
yeah, I think I like the idea of it a lot, of it being just always in your opening hand instead of it being in like a separate, quote unquote command zone in other formats. I think that's simpler, and it does, like you said, it nerfs the power level a lot with them.
Yeah, my thought on whether or not they're going to do this, I think that they're not going to ultimately, because they already went ahead and banned some of them in Legacy. So I think they're just going to lean heavier into the ban thing. I'm really hoping that. So, we've seen lately, like this year and last year, we've seen some very significant power increases in standard decks, Oko, Uro, Companions, so many like absurdly powerful cards that are, the most dominant cards to date, really. I mean, Oko and Lurrus are arguably the most dominant cards to ever exist.
I think dominant is a really good word for how those cards affect the format.
Yeah, and so I think that hopefully, my prediction, because they start each set 4 years in advance, basically. Each set goes through this 4-year production cycle. So, 4 years ago, from whenever Throne of Eldraine came out, they said, hey, let's increase the power level of standard cards, so we can shake up other formats and stuff. And then now that we're seeing those effects, hopefully, 4 years from Oko or sooner, they'll have realized that that was a bad idea. So then they'll have changed things. They'll have dropped the mechanics, because whatever's coming out in the core set, 2021, the 1 mana Teferi or whatever, is ultimately, that card's probably pretty close to finished anyway. so they're probably not going to make too many changes. But in the next like year or two, hopefully we'll see like a back to basics where everything's moved back into standard is a medium powered format. Occasionally, some cards trickle into modern. Sometimes cards will trickle into legacy, and rarely cards will trickle into vintage when they make a mistake.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see just if there's a general trend in decreasing power level in the years to come with standard, because there definitely has been a significant rise in power level over the last year or two.
It really started with Aether Revolt, because that's when Fatal Push came out, and Fatal Push changed the way Eternal formats work. It's the Black Lightning Bolt. It's so powerful, and it's a staple among so many decks. It's a staple among just black decks across every Eternal format, and it was really good in Standard too, to be honest. So, and that was a few years ago. So hopefully we're seeing the tail end of this power increase.
I think in order for Magic to continue to survive as a game that is enjoyed by so many people, I think there will need to be a decrease in power, because the continuous power creep just continues to create really oppressive cards that don't allow people who just want to play the game for fun to actually do anything. Like, if you're trying to play against an Oko with your goofy kitchen table deck, you won't be able to play the game since all of your permanents just become elk.
Also, I was just going to say, with a decreasing power level, that also would probably mean less bans, which ultimately I'm a fan of not banning as many cards, because then you don't have people losing their monetary investments in cards that they went and bought and things like that.
I think the era that we're actually in is very reminiscent of the post-Urza block Magic environment, where they had just printed a bunch of broken cards, and they sort of had to reevaluate their set design philosophy and come back to it with a fresh slate. I think monetary gain is definitely a factor. It's hard to believe that there's not some driving force behind this rise in the power level recently, and obviously financial gain is a pretty good motivator. It's not hard to believe that some, high up individual at Wizards of the Coast told the R&D, they were like, we want to have powerful cards that people want to collect and buy, and we want to make sure that, although they're not allowed to officially acknowledge it, that the cards have a high secondary market rate that makes people want to collect them out of the packs.
Yeah, which almost makes it worse when you consider the fact that these high power cards, which they're hoping will deliver monetary incentive, they end up banning, will lose most of their monetary value.
Absolutely.
I just wish that they went back to their older, because they have other methods to monetize modern and legacy players. Modern Masters, they sell like hotcakes. Just reprint all the cards that modern players want. You can just print the same card again. If you print Karn Liberated for the 9th time, people are still gonna buy that. Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger needs a reprint. You could print it the next set and the set after, and that will be considered a good reprint every single one of those sets in a row.
Yeah, and even independently of the secondary market, if cards get reprinted, the costs on the secondary market will go down, but they can continue to sell reprinted cards in packs the same price as they did at a previous point which they reprinted it, right? Because they're just selling packs.
For sure, but the goal is to create a desired product, and the scarcity of the cards is really actually what the driving force behind the high prices.
Honestly, I think if packs are the thing, also I think they're really motivated to sell. I don't know why they went away from like masterpieces and things like that. I thought those were really cool, like things you could pull from packs, and actually a good incentive to buy packs to try to pull those cards.
I agree with you 100%. I really like the masterpiece cycle. I think they add a lot to the cracking experience. And I remember I actually cracked a masterpiece planar bridge one time, and it's a memory that sticks with me because of how unique it was.
Yeah, I really hope when they go back to Zendikar, they bring back expeditions.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I remember I won a pack in a Yu-Gi-Oh tournament because Konami doesn't allow cash payouts, so like the store just has to give out packs of stuff. And I got a Magic pack, and I got an Expedition Scalding Tarn, and I remember pulling that, and it was just so sweet. They're so fun, really. They just need to make them just not have as many. It's the same problem with what we're going to see with Double Masters, right? We're going to see, Mana Crypt is going to be in this set, Doubling Season is going to be in this set, all these great mythics. But there's also going to be garbage ones. And there were garbage expeditions. Not expeditions, those were all pretty good. Garbage masterpieces, like Black Vice or whatever. Like, what am I supposed to do with that if I pull it?
It's really hard to overlook the reason for those inclusions as well, because the idea is that you pull one of those and you feel bad and you feel inclined to buy another pack with the hopes of getting something better, and I think that's actually really gross. I think the inclusion of, again, like the masterpiece Black Vice is like, who's using it,
Yeah, we should brew a deck around Black Vice, make an EDH deck like that.
That'd be fun. I think there is a modern mono black discard deck that I think uses Black Vice.
I don't think so. I don't think it's modern legal actually.
Oh, am I thinking of the rack?
I think you're thinking of the rack.
Okay. Well, this just in, the Black Vice flippin' sucks.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll build my Kami of the Crescent Moon deck, and I'll really show you guys with my masterpiece Black Vice. Let's move on to our main topic here. So today we're talking politics. So when let's first define politics, and coming at it from a perspective of playing casual and competitive, I think in both scenarios it has a place, just in different ways. Politics is the deals you make, the arguments you make to a player to change their mind for your benefit, typically, I assume. It can come in many, many forms. You can help players, harm players, team up on a player, anything like that.
I would like to present an interesting idea here. I would almost argue that politics is the third layer of Magic Gathering, so that you have your board state and you have your hand, and I think you also have your politics. And I think all of those factors actually interact with one another in a very interesting way. For example, you can present a kill spell through politics. You can be like, don't swing that creature at me, or I will kill it with the kill spell I have in hand. And that threat represents, the card advantage that you have, potentially a large number of cards in hand, the mana that you have open, and potentially the threats you represent on board.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair, as long as, obviously as long as you're referring to a multiplayer format.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is a Commander podcast, so.
We're not talking politics for modern here. That doesn't work. I don't think that works very well.
When your opponent's about to crack in for lethal and you're like, okay, so what if I buy you a thing of fraud?
I mean, who knows? Maybe that would work.
You never know.
I don't know if we can call them layers, because layers is something else in the game there. I liked your idea, though.
That's okay. We can take another pass at it if you want.
No, it's fine. I think I don't think that actually matters. I just think it's kind of funny.
I mean, layer ordering is a mechanic that is technically involved in Commander, because sometimes people play their Opalescence before their Humility, and then you get them on the layer rules.
Oh, those people are fools.
Pretty cringe.
Yeah, let me start by knocking a couple of things out of the way. I think that first there's a couple of distinctions we need to make. One, I think that people say in CDH there's no politics. That's definitely a lie, especially in a format where Tassier is so common, one of the most political cards. I think that doing politics doesn't ever mean that you have to give up anything. It can still be objectively optional. It can still be objectively good for you and beneficial to you almost exclusively by playing into the politics. So even if you look at it from a slightly more competitive standpoint, politics is still going to be really important. And secondly, I think we should clarify the difference between a group hug deck and a politics deck.
I think the big distinction between like a politics deck and a group hug deck is a group hug deck doesn't necessarily give favors or make deals with other players in an attempt to better position itself within the game. I feel like more it does that just to, I don't know, I guess appease other players, but doesn't do so to put itself in a greater position. Whereas if you're making deals very strategically and politically, you're definitely doing it with the motivation in mind that this will pay out for me later in the game to be in a higher position than whoever I'm making the deal with. I mean, because ultimately, right, if I make a political deal with you, you know, I am gambling on the fact that what I'm doing will put me in a position that will be, you know, better off than what you're at by taking this deal, right? Otherwise, I wouldn't make the deal. Or I feel it's like with the group hug deck, you know, I just the point of my deck is just to put everybody else in a better position than myself so that I'm overlooked and go ignored so I can come in second every game.
So I personally feel that group hug decks fill a very similar role as chaos decks, where it's not so much about winning the game, it's about experiencing exciting board states. And I think as a whole, that mindset is bad for playing Magic, because Magic is about reducing your opponent's life total from 40 to 0. I think playing cards that just cause the game to happen faster typically don't actually result in, you know, any sort of advantage. It's just more about making the game happen quicker or more random in some aspect.
Yeah, I think maybe like a good comparison would be Stacks, right? Where Stacks makes the game go slower as opposed to Group Hug, which makes the game go faster, right? But if you're playing a Stacks deck, you're doing it to put yourself in some advantageous position because you have some way to like break it or something like that, where it doesn't affect you as harshly. You know, with Group Hug, you don't really have anything like that. You're just putting your opponents in a better position.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a Stacks player at heart, and the entire idea behind Stacks is establishing some sort of threat and then reducing the ability for your opponent to generate value. Where a group hug deck is, it just generates value for everyone without presenting any sort of advantage based on that. Like, when you playing a group hug deck result in everyone producing like 900 mana, you don't actually have a payoff for that in any way. You just, you know, as Tanner said really well, you come in second place. Like, the person who wins, it gets to thank you in person, but besides that, you really don't win the game.
Yeah, right. Does the Group Hug player actually ever come in first? I think their goal is always just to not come in last. They always come in second. Anyways, maybe should we talk about some of our philosophies in politicking and deal making?
Yeah, so for us generally, like, you know, we obviously stick to our deals. That's one of the key tenets. You can't, as soon as you start lying and deceiving, you lose all political power because no one will ever make a deal with you again. It'll work one time if you're in a random play group, you know, but then if you ever play again with those people, that's just it. You don't get to be part of the politics anymore, and that can lead you to a significant disadvantage.
As I previously mentioned, your politics are actually an aspect of the game that are very tangible, and by losing out on that trust that you've built with other players, you are at a significant disadvantage because no one will respect the threats or promises that you make. It's all just void at this point. And you've essentially nullified your ability as a player to interact with the board state.
Yeah, for sure. For us, you know, we're totally okay with being tricky or clever with your deals. You have to be specific when making a deal, and if you let your opponent make something generalized, I will not destroy any of your creatures, means that Path to Exile is fair game. You can still have your commander get exiled.
Yeah, I think there's no discouraging of being tricky with deals and you know, setting up loopholes and stuff like that, because honestly I feel like that's part of what makes it fun is, you know, crafting these kind of clever things and getting people to agree, and then, you know, them not knowing whatever you had planned, you do something like, oh well, you can't do that. It's like, well, actually I can, right? I didn't say I wasn't going to technically do this.
Exactly. That payoff is so fun.
Here's a question for you. I'm curious what you think. What if we made a deal, or I said, I wouldn't, I don't know, I wouldn't kill your commander or something, or I wouldn't cause your commander to die, but I do something that kills it, but in this format, wouldn't it technically not die, but go back to the command zone?
No, it actually still technically dies, but I, as a player, have the choice to send it back to the command zone.
And if you choose if you choose to have it go back to the command zone, it no longer died. It's a replacement effect. But here's the thing about that one is kill is not actually a term in Magic. So if you use a generic term like kill, I feel like if you got rid of my commander in any capacity other than maybe bouncing it, I would say, hey, you made a deal. Because that's not one of the, like, there's nothing actually says kill. Like, we call them kill spells, but it doesn't say kill on the card. There's destroy and exile.
No, that's fair. Yeah, I think that's a good assessment of it.
Let's talk about some of our favorite politics cards. So if you want to build a politics deck, or let's start with some politics commanders, actually. Looking at EDH Rec, you have the top politics commanders, Kenrith, Oloro, Centriplets, Ramos, Tasker, Child of Alara, and Marieki. I think Tasker is probably one of my favorites.
I think Tasker presents a very unique option where you can come to a deal that is very well presented. You can go, hey, Tanner, look, there was a counterspell in my graveyard. Can I have it? And you don't really get that from a lot of other commanders in the way that you have that direct link between the two players.
Would you mind reminding me, and I guess for anyone else that doesn't know, what Tassiger does?
Absolutely not.
Epic.
Oh, I will. Tassiger is 1 black and 5 generic mana for a 4/5 legendary creature, human shaman. He has Delve, and the ability you can pay 2 generic and 2 hybrid Simic to put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. Then return a non-land card of an opponent's choice from your graveyard to your hand.
Sure, yeah, that is a very political card, because you can definitely convince your opponents to give you better cards if they promise to use them for something that might benefit them later or something like that.
Absolutely. I think it falls into the same category as Fact or Fiction.
Which is a great political card too. Definitely, Fact or Fiction's a really nice one. I actually think I really like Shattergang Brothers as a politics, an underrated politics commander. If you don't know what they do, they're a Jund legendary commander, and they have 3 abilities. One where you sack a creature, everyone sacks a creature. You sack an artifact, everyone sacks an artifact. You sack an enchantment, everyone sacks an enchantment. Pretty straightforward. But basically the best card in the entire deck is Hammer of Purphoros, which it gives you creatures haste, which is not relevant, but it lets you sack lands, I think, to summon a artifact enchantment creature, which means you can use each ability for Shattergang Brothers. So you can really easily make deals and say, hey, this person has 1 big enchantment in play. I can get rid of it. I can force someone to sack an enchantment. What do you got for me? And by having the ability to destroy almost any type of permanent really easily, you can make a lot of deals.
For sure, that's definitely a cool political commander I haven't heard of before.
What do you think of Zerdu the Great-Hearted?
Ooh, that's an interesting one. So we should probably read some of these so that people know what they do. But Zerdu's Jeskai.
This is an audio-based format, so visual representation is a little rough.
Yeah. Zedru is a 1 and Jeskai for 1/3, 1/4, I think. And most importantly, has the ability that you can pay Jeskai to give a permanent you control to another player permanently. And then on your upkeep, you draw cards and gain life equal to the number of cards you own but do not control.
Yeah, that's definitely a fun card because, right, you can give some advantageous enchantment to someone. It's like, oh, if I give this to you, which will help you in this regard, then maybe you'll help me. Or you can give like bad cards, that inhibit people from doing something like aggressive mining, right, which stops people from being able to play lands.
Yeah, there's a couple
Absolutely.
of weird golems that don't let you play creatures. It's like a 3 mana 3/4. And that one's really brutal if you give it to certain decks.
Yeah, that's really funny.
In the spirit of sheer diplomacy, how do you guys feel about illusion of choice? For 1 blue, it's an instant that allows you to choose how other players vote this turn, and it also draws a card.
Oh, that's pretty interesting. Although I would imagine I don't know how political that is because it seems like if you're playing that, you're going to warp it to just always be voting in whatever is going to favor you the best. I don't know if you're really engaging with anyone else in that regard. It seems like you're just taking control of it. But maybe you can like threaten to not change the vote a certain way if people will comply to do something.
Well, it
Yeah,
also implies that you're playing voting cards in your deck, which are inherently political anyway. So, like, if you're not playing any voting cards, this is a really bad cantrip.
That's true.
I think one of my favorite, just like politics cards. It's a sort of new one. Recent commander set, like 2 commander sets ago. Orzhov Advocist. It's a white and 2 for a 1/4 creature, human advisor. At the beginning of your upkeep, each player may put 2 counters on a creature they control. If they do that, they cannot attack you or a planeswalker you control until your next turn. So on each of your turns, all on your upkeep, every opponent at the table has to decide whether or not they're going to attack you next turn, like right then and there. And if they don't put the counters on, then you know that they're probably going to attack you, so you can just mess with their board.
I've actually played this in a deck before, and I was a little underwhelmed by it. It seems like most of the time people just slap the counters on their creatures until they get too large to deal with, and then eventually they decide not to put counters on them and start swinging those huge creatures at you.
Yeah, I can see that. I think you need to pair it with like propaganda, ghostly prison type effects, so that if they spend 3 or 4 turns just putting counters on their dudes, that's fine. You're spending 3 or 4 turns making it so that it'll cost 20 mana to attack you anyway.
True, but if you are playing propaganda or ghostly prism, they only do have to play 2 mana to swing that potentially massive boy your way.
Do either of you know about the card Guafa Hazid Profiteer?
I put him in the command zone once.
Yeah, I think that's a very funny and political card because you can threaten to make people's creatures not be able to attack or block, or you're like, oh, I won't put a bribery counter on that if you don't attack me or if you attack someone else with it.
Why don't you
At the
give
same time,
Guafa a read for the people at home?
Yeah, give me 1 sec to pull it up. Yeah, so Guafa Hazid Profiteer is a 1 blue and a white for a human wizard with you can pay a blue and a white and tap to put a bribery counter on target creature you don't control. Its controller draws a card. So by putting a counter on it, you draw the person a card. The creatures with bribery counters on them can't attack or block.
I think it's a great political card. You can also potentially create benefits for individuals who can cast spells in your favor because you pacify a creature that they don't really care about. Maybe it's like a mana dork of some sort, and you let them draw a card. And you can use that to, as a bargaining chip.
But actually, I misspoke. He's a human rogue, not a human wizard.
How dare you?
Yeah, that's it. We have to delete the whole podcast and start over.
But I think probably just the most maybe political commander is probably Kenrith.
I mean, he does it all, right? He can gain anyone life, put counters on anything, give anyone trample and haste, and reanimate creatures for any player. It's just he's definitely probably the most powerful. He's one of the most powerful commanders, period. But he's probably the most powerful politics commander, just in the sheer fact that he can give any player almost any type of advantage.
For sure. I think Kenrith would still be one of the most powerful commanders, even if his abilities only targeted you. The fact that he can be used in a diplomatic role really just accentuates his power.
I think Cruel Entertainment is also a pretty spicy political card. It's black and 6 for a sorcery, choose target player and another target player. The first player controls the second player during their turn, and the second player controls the first player during their next turn. And this card, man, I need to put it in something because it's wild.
That's a very wild card. I really like that. It could be funny, if someone targets you with that, maybe you agree to both use each other's turn to like juice the other two people in exchange for not juicing each other's boards.
Oh yeah, I think that the political implications of that card is like infinite.
For sure. You could also have both agreed to just bully the guy who targeted you both with the spell.
I think the most powerful use of it is, let's say, we're in a pod, there's a fourth player, and Ben is in a really advantageous position, but he's going third, and Tanner's in a really bad position, and he's going after me. If I target you two and have you swap, if Ben takes Tanner's turn and Tanner, you have no board state or no cards in hand, there's not a whole lot you can do. But then when you take Ben's turn, you can do a bunch of crazy things that will ultimately just hurt him in the end. And I can make that deal with you, Tanner, to just screw over Ben.
Yeah, that's definitely a very funny card with a lot of possibilities.
So, have either of you built a politics deck? And if not, why?
I have not.
No, I haven't either. I haven't built a deck that's been solely centered on being a political deck. Instead, I just use politics as a tool while playing, any of my normal decks that I would be playing.
Yeah, same. I find that it's much more common that I simply utilize politics during a game of Magic than that I have specifically wanted to build a deck around that. That being said, I've been looking at cards here on Scryfall that utilize the voting mechanic, and there are a number of really neat things. Like, are you guys aware of Coercive Portal?
Yeah. Would you like to read that one?
Yeah, for sure. So Coercive Portal is a 4-mana artifact that at the beginning of your upkeep, starting with you, each player votes for either Carnage or Hominage. If Carnage receives more votes, you sacrifice the portal and you destroy all non-land permanents. However, if Hominage receives more votes or the vote is tied, you draw a card. So for 4 mana, you have to place down essentially an Oblivion Stone, and the table can decide when it cracks, and until it does, you just continue to draw cards off of it.
Yeah, and as long as you vote for homage, as long as one other player at the table does not want their board to be destroyed, you will always draw a card every turn, which is really nice.
And the fact that when the table needs to remove somebody's board, they can decide to is really handy.
So if you were going to give a new player some advice on politics, someone they know how to play the game, but they're new to EDH, maybe they've played Legacy, maybe they played Modern, what would you recommend to them? Let's start with Ben.
I think the most important thing when dealing with politics is revealing very specific information. I think being able to show the table a card is very powerful, and when you potentially enlighten tutor for some, again, like maybe an Oblivion Stone, you're showing the table that don't play out too far. I have an answer ready to go. You can really stunt people's growth from there and sort of get in their heads.
I think that's a bit of a double-edged sword. It is, when you reveal the mana drain, people don't want to play into it, obviously. But at the same time, if someone does play something threatening, then I know for a fact I can just pass priority because I know you have that counterspell in hand. So it could be a bit of a double-edged sword sometimes.
That's very true.
How about you, Tanner? What would you recommend to a new player for getting started in politics?
Yeah, I think what I would just recommend is don't underestimate the power of it. You definitely, you can definitely be able to survive a lot longer than you normally might otherwise not be able to by not interacting with other players. I think it's probably something that's maybe underlooked, that you can use the other 3 players at the table to try to get what you want or to try to boost you up in some way. I'd also say be very careful to not go back on your deals, because then, nobody will ever make a deal with you again or want to play with you, and you'll probably get ganged up on if you're the person that in the pod who always goes back on their word.
I think that I would probably have to also say not underestimating the power level of it and how strong politics is. If you think about, if I can convince Ben to use that counterspell on this thing, I have 2-for-1 to my opponents because I have 2-for-0 to my opponents, right? I've spent 0 cards. I just spent my words to have Ben lose a counterspell and the other player to lose their threat at the same time. That level, if you think about it in a card advantage aspect, it's a lot of card advantage. All right, so that's going to conclude our podcast for this week. By week, we've been a little late, been kind of busy. So hopefully you learned something about politics. Hopefully our ramblings about the cost of Magic hasn't been too tedious to get through. And we'll see you probably in 2 weeks.
See you later.
Bye.